Yo, what's up everybody? Today I'm going to show you my TMNT Arcade1Up modified cabinet. I've got it going with a Raspberry Pi running RetroPie, and this one, maybe unlike other builds, is using all Industrias Lorenzo or Suzo Happ buttons and joysticks. Alright, game on! So I really wanted to put one of these things together. And I did not want it to use just the typical like Amazon buttons that people are using. I wanted the legit feel of like the good old-fashioned buttons you would see in a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat cabinet. So this, of course, is going to be Industrias Lorenzo. And I've accomplished that, but it made it like a lot harder, to be honest with you. The joysticks in particular do not fit as nicely in these cabinets as the Amazon ones do. The mounting is just like thicker and it takes up a lot more depth, and there's really not a lot of depth to work with in the first place here. So I had to make some modifications just to make everything fit, but it is possible, and I wanted to just kind of walk you through that today. So this is not going to be like a tutorial on how to build the entire thing. But what it is going to be is just kind of an explanation of what I've pulled off and how I did it. Came up with a couple different ideas, and I'm sure you guys could come up with even better ideas if you put your mind to it. So here we go. What I've got is just a Raspberry Pi running RetroPie emulation station, and I ended up going with a Flirc case, which is passive cooling. In hindsight, I think I would have probably opted to use active cooling, like something with a real fan that kicks on. So that way maybe I could like overclock it and run some more intense games. But so far, the Flirc case is keeping up pretty nicely with what I set out to do. I've got some Dreamcast stuff. I'm mostly just running main games on it, but it'll barely keep up with N64. So the buttons, I have kind of a mishmash. The orange and purple are IL, Industrias Lorenzo's buttons. The red and blue buttons are actually Suzo Happ. You guys can easily Google what the difference is between the two. But I went with all IL joysticks. But the player 1, which is the orange one, is a little bit different. These are the IL Eurosticks, but this one is actually the IL Mag Stick. It has a magnetic return to center, which is a lot less play. But mostly the important thing of why I chose the magnetic return to center is because this joystick has the ability to switch between being a 4-way, up, down, left, right, or an 8-way, where it actually recognizes the corners. And that makes a pretty huge difference on these emulators, because like if you're trying to play Pac-Man, where it only recognizes 4 directions, and you hit a corner, then Pac-Man just freaks out and he doesn't know which direction to go. So there's actually a switch underneath here, which is right up against the mounting plate. And I've actually drilled a hole, which I will show you shortly, in the bottom of the deck where I can reach up and grab that switch. And then I can toggle it between 4-way and 8-way. And that way Donkey Kong or Pac-Man work a lot better, and I don't accidentally hit any corners. Ultimately, I wasn't really a big fan of this joystick, unfortunately. I don't mind the shorter throw, but it's just really clunky. It's like hard to use. It makes your wrist really tired. And especially on like Street Fighter when you are in 8-way mode, if you're trying to throw a good old Hadouken, I don't know, it's just really clunky. There's like actually a lot more wiggly play here, where it doesn't trigger any motions. So I can't say I really ultimately recommend that joystick. It is really nice to be able to switch between 4-way and 8-way so easily, but ultimately the joystick's kind of lame. Now on with the coin buttons, I used Paradise Arcade Shop's house brand of light up LEDs, and I went with 5-volt ultra bright LEDs. As you can probably see, one of them is not lighting up. And I think that is also due to this awesome orange joystick that I chose. The switches are different, the micro switches. They're not the like standard cherry micro switches that the Eurosticks use. They're sort of a larger switch, which requires a wider quick connect cable to go into the USB encoder. And I think because of that, this joystick is actually drawing more power than anything else. So when I tried to light up this light up coin button on player 1 and also be powering this orange joystick, the whole deck just went haywire. Like, buttons were flashing and no buttons actually triggered any action. So it was just too much of a power draw. So I haven't quite figured that out yet. I might try something like a powered USB splitter to see if that gives me enough juice. But right now I just unplugged it, so it's functional. The button actually works, it's just not lit up. So how, might you ask, did I manage to fit all of this in a deck? Like I mentioned, these joysticks and these buttons are very deep. They go way down in the cabinet, and there was not enough room for them. So I had to drill some holes. And you can see, down here, there's my blue joystick. And I just needed a little bit of extra wiggle room to allow it to function. But yeah, not too hard. You can't really notice anything on this side. It's kind of a weird angle, sorry. Yeah, you can see one on the red on the far right as well. But yeah, I mean, this like angled plate pretty much hides it for players, the middle players, which is pretty cool. You can barely see, it's kind of dark under here. Sorry, great camera work. Yeah, right here, there's the hole that I drilled to be able to reach up and be able to hit that switch. So yeah, I mean, this really made the whole project a lot more difficult because these buttons are really deep and the joysticks are really deep. And there's just really not a lot of room to work in there. And then even like these coin buttons, they're pretty deep as well. So they're just about hitting these buttons also. But I was able to just kind of mash it in there and drill the extra holes on the bottom so that the joystick wiggles around without hitting the bottom of the deck. And the alternative solution that I thought was maybe like try to make a gap in between that bottom black part and like the actual deck. But like it was just gonna be too wiggly and I didn't think I was gonna be able to pull it off and still make it really sturdy. And yeah, I thought maybe like if I made that cool gap that I could fill it with like one of those cheap LED light strips and it would look really cool, but it was just really hard to like match these machine screws and yeah, it was just gonna be a wiggly mess. So I just drilled a few extra holes in the bottom and it works fine. Interestingly enough, this red joystick hole here, which was already drilled, and this original button hole, which was already drilled, those two holes are about 1/8 of an inch closer together than any of the other colors. So given that my IL joysticks take up so much room, it wasn't going to fit here. It was actually going to hit up against this wall that goes underneath, like this thing. And it was also going to hit up against these buttons. So I had to take a hacksaw and just shave a nice little edge of the controller off. And I wish that I would have kind of realized that before I attached the blue one. Sorry about my barking dog. Banjo! Yeah, because I mounted this blue one in there and I got a little bit too close to this edge. And so I sort of had to make a little notch in the side that nobody's going to notice. I might just like stick a sticker or some electrical tape over it to hide it. But yeah, I kind of ran out of room and have parts poking out. But that's okay. Hi, Banjo. Can you stop barking? Thank you. On with the show. Yeah, so like I'm really happy with the quality of these joysticks. They feel just like the real deal, the old school Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter era, as well as the buttons. And as I mentioned, I have kind of a mishmash of buttons. These are IL, but these are actually Suzo Happ. And the quality's not that much different. Like, I can definitely tell that the IL ones are a little more durable, and they kind of feel like brand new buttons, whereas these Suzo Happ ones, they almost kind of feel like pre-washed denim. They feel like they've been bashed a few more times in an arcade. So they almost feel more realistic to me, because I was always playing arcade games in some pizza place where like little kids hammered on these things. Whereas these ones are just, you can tell they're higher quality. So yeah, I mean, they may not last as long, but I'm sure they'll still take a beating. and they're pretty legit. I can't speak to the quality difference between IL and Suzo Happ joysticks though, because I didn't buy any. I just got all IL joysticks. I heard that the main difference on the Suzo Happ joysticks these days is that they come with like a cheaper plastic actuator as opposed to a nice nylon one. But yeah, I mean, these things are so legit. They feel like the old school arcade cabinets did. Yeah, and I mean the Paradise Arcade Shop light up buttons, they're cheap. They obviously don't feel like legit buttons, but they function, and the ones that are lit up, I think they look super cool, especially at nighttime when all the lights are out. Yeah, so one thing I also wanted to mention on here was sound. This definitely threw me for a loop. I looked a lot what people were doing for sound on these things, and I just didn't see like a ton of really good reactions. Like a lot of people were taking the original 3.5mm jack that feeds into the stock speakers, which are up above, and they were like cutting it. They were cutting that 3.5mm jack. So they were cutting the jack so that the wires were exposed, and then they were just feeding that into a stereo receiver. I didn't really want to do that because then I have to cut some of the original parts up, and if I mess up stripping wires, then I could be in big trouble. So I found this solution, which was actually really cool. I will show it to you in the back, wiggle around the wall. And what it is that I got this wire right here. So that is the LCD controller board you're looking at. I'm sure if you check out ETA Prime's video, you will know what it is all about. But yeah, right above where this audio out is, this one is not amplified. It's a 3.5mm jack. You can get sound here off of this thing, but it will not be loud at all. And if you come right up here to this thing, which I'll put a link in the comments, you can get these off of Amazon. It's 4 wires, and you actually need 2 cables. You need this one, which goes down to just straight wires, and then you need one below it, which goes into a female 3.5mm audio jack. So then you can connect your original 3.5mm audio that goes up to the speakers to that. And you just have to splice the wires. So that was exposed wires coming to this 4-pin thing, exposed wires going to female TSSR, I think, 3.5mm jack. And then you plug it right into there, and you actually get amplified sound. Yeah, it's super cool. And then you just control the volume using the monitor, using this sister board, the left and right audio. And you can volume it up, and honestly, at about 20%, you're super loud. While that boots up, yeah, I did not do anything with the on-off switch. I totally saw where people were doing really cool stuff to make that send a shutdown command to the Pi. I just didn't want to deal with it. The cables or the wires were really short on that lead, and I didn't feel like drilling a hole in my Flirc case. Hey, we got sound. Let me see what percentage I'm at here. Yeah, so I'm at like 15%. You could probably hear it. It's plenty loud. Alright, so we got amplified sound, and I didn't have to buy an amplifier, and I didn't have to cut any of the original wires that came with the Raspberry Pi. Super cool also. And it works pretty well. So yeah, that's my build. I mean, honestly, again, it's really probably not worth the extra cost to put IL and Suzo Happ buttons and joysticks in these things, because I get it, they're just a toy, they're just for fun. But if you really want that cool feel that the nostalgia will provide you of hitting all the buttons and mashing them really hard like you would in the pizza places like I did, yeah, get yourself some IL buttons, and just be aware that it's going to be a little trickier to fit everything. You're going to have to drill some holes in the bottom here so that you can wiggle around, but that's no problem. You just use the same hole saw that you used for your buttons. And then, yeah, just be cognizant that that base plate, especially on this red one, is going to be tricky because it's way too wide. Kind of the same thing with this blue one. Might have been able to just offset it a little bit or maybe shave the side. I mean, again, I can't shave anything here, so I would have had to offset it so it's not perfectly centered. But I think I could have done that if I wanted to. And the other catch is that all the Amazon kits, they mount from the bottom up, just like the original joysticks did. Whereas you could do that, but these are a little bit heavier duty. So I was thinking that just those little tiny wood screws going up into the deck wasn't going to be sturdy enough. So I actually used some proper seated machine screws and bolts so that they're really in there to stay. Yeah, again, shout out to Paradise Arcade Shop where I got most of these buttons. Some of them I actually got also from Focus Attack. Check out both of those websites if you're taking on this project because they have the IL and or Suzo Happ gear that you would be looking for. And then I also appreciated their customer service. I had questions for them. They were really cool about emailing me back. And I do think that the Paradise Arcade Shop light up LED buttons look super cool, especially at night. Yep, if you want to do something like overclocking, get yourself something more like an active cooling case rather than the Flirc case, although the Flirc case looks really cool. And again, the Flirc case doesn't allow you to access the, whatever they're called, I/O pins, GPIO pins. So if I wanted to do something with the on-off switch, I would be drilling a hole in that Flirc case. Also, maybe go with a more active cooling solution that exposes the GPIO pins on the Raspberry Pi to start with. Then you can actually use that on-off switch without messing up your case. Oh yeah, so here's like a super crazy pro tip. When you get these Arcade1Up things, they are not in any way, shape, or fashion attached to this base, and you got to have the base unless you want to play like on the floor or like unless you're really short, which I'm not. You got to have that base to boost it up to be tall enough. And what they do is they give you self-tapping screws so you can just drill into the side. Like the base itself has holes drilled, but the cabinet doesn't have any holes drilled. So I don't know, that was kind of gnarly to me. And also I would like to maybe move this thing around my house occasionally. And so for it to be less heavy, I didn't want to permanently fix the two together. What I did instead, the Arcade1Up came with some of this foam. I think it was probably protecting the monitor. And it's actually pretty good quality foam. So I just like cut maybe like a 1" by 3 or 4" strip of it. And then I just wedged that foam down here on the back side of the cabinet. And when I sit the Arcade1Up cabinet down into that base, now it's actually really sturdy. I mean, it's wobbly because it's on carpet, but it's not sliding around within that riser at all. So if you want to save yourself the headache of permanently fixing these Arcade1Up machines to that riser, do like I did. Just keep this foam and cut yourself a nice little strip. Mash it in the bottom there in the back corners on each side, and it'll sit really nicely. I was really stoked. Yeah, and if we're on the subject of lessons learned, there's just no great way of drilling the holes if you're going to do a 6-button configuration on this orange player, because you're stuck with the original holes that you got, which are these two, and they're sloping down. So I have seen some people go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and that just feels pretty terrible on your wrist because you're way over to the side of the cabinet. So I wanted to be more looking straight forward, and I went like this, but it's just really awkward. Like purple is great. It is like perfectly aligned with how the natural shape of your fingers are, but you can't really have that same shape over here because the holes were drilled here instead of here. So yeah, I don't know, in hindsight maybe I would have done the same thing I did on the top ones, but then maybe just gone straight across on the bottom ones, even though there'd be quite a large gap in between these buttons. I'm not sure. There's just no good way about it. Just be realistic that you're going to have some kind of funky button layout if you're going to do a 6-button layout on this player. I agree with everyone else. Just throw it in the trash. I did kind of just for the fun of it see if I could drill it out, and I just cracked one button, but you have to get like a larger hole saw because If you use the same hole saw you use for these holes, this button actually sits up on top of the plastic, whereas the original holes drilled in the clear acrylic case, what do you call it, top thing, like they drilled the holes larger than the actual button, so that it's down inside of it. So you need some kind of different hole saw. I mean, it's just not worth the effort. Just get yourself a can of clear coat. Yeah, anything that's like shiny, no texture, ultra clear, throw a few coats on there, you'll be good to go. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, get yourself like a nice steel rule so you can measure exactly where to put all of the buttons and don't eyeball them. Otherwise you'll end up with crooked ones. And yeah, have fun. Game on. Check out the description for all of my parts list and drop me a comment if you have any questions. Peace.